We are going to get started. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Lisa Kaplowitz. I am the co-founder and executive director of the Rutgers Center for Women in Business, where we do three things: remove barriers, build community, and empower women. All of that because we are changing the face and future of leadership. We are so excited to have you with us today. We are going to be talking about building your network to support career development. And I am so grateful to have with me two amazing women who are also mentors in our Women Grow mid-career mentoring circles. GROW stands for Gaining and Retaining Outstanding Women. I'm going to start with Jackie Stallings Evans. She is the founder and CEO of What Do You Do When Leadership Inc. She is she's a coach, she's a consultant. She's actually a former IBM executive, internationally certified leadership coach, and board certified leadership coach. She has written her second book. It is called Rise: Game-Changing Success Strategies for Women Leaders. And it is coming out, fingers crossed, at the end of the month, which we are really excited. And in it, she draws upon real-world challenges and successes to equip female leaders with tools and strategies to navigate and advance their career. So thank you, Jackie, for joining us.
Thank you so much, Lisa. I'm excited to be here.
Amazing. Next, we have Heather Gould. She is founder and CEO of Catapult Growth Advisors. She is a seasoned C-suite executive with a track record for defining strategies to create enterprise value in companies, big and small, public and private. In 2020, she founded her firm, advising CEOs of growing companies on how to navigate challenges that come with growth. She enjoys coaching and advising first-time CEOs and rising executives who express vision and a desire to expand their careers. So, in addition to what we're talking about here, if any one of you needs additional coaching and advising expertise, please feel free to reach out to my friends and colleagues here. With that, what we like to do at the beginning of each of the, so thank you, Heather, for joining us.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here. Thanks for having me.
Of course, I was getting so excited to dive in. What we like to do at the beginning of these sessions is really just get a pulse on who's here, who's in our audience, because who signs up isn't necessarily who's attending. And so want to ask you all a question. And I'm a professor, but I will allow phones right now, even though I don't in my classroom. So scan the QR code. We just want to get a pulse and ask you a question. I think Viviana is going to put the link in the chat as well. You can text RBS CWIB 401 to the phone number, enter the phone number 37607. Okay, let's see if our technology works. The first question I want to ask you all is, how strong is your network? There's a little QR code at the top as well. I'm going to start the poll now. How strong is your network? A, very strong. B, moderately strong. C, neither strong nor weak, just kind of in the middle. D, moderately weak. And oh no, we have some that are very weak. Well, hopefully by the end of the session, it will not be very weak. We will feel very confident, and we will have the tools and tips available to form not only a strong network, but a really impactful network. So good. So I think, Jackie and Heather, we've got a lot to share, and I think it's going to be really helpful for our audience. Now, one more question for you all. It looks like most folks are moderately strong, neither weak nor strong. Great. One word. I want you all to answer in one word, and you can answer multiple times. Why do you think it's not as strong as you think it should be? What would make your network better? What would make your network better? Confidence, time, lots of time. I wish I had more time. I think we all wish sometimes we could be like Hermione Granger and be in multiple places at multiple times. Consistency, that's huge as well. It looks like time is the biggest one, and connections. You know, sometimes our confidence gets in the way of us making connections. And that's really important as well. I love these word clouds because, you know, a word is important, but a picture really does say 1,000 words, and a word cloud kind of does all of that all together. So it really seems like we really need more time, but we need the connection. We have imposter syndrome. We need acceptance. We need to engage more, but most of all, we need more time. So I don't know that we can actually clone ourselves and give us more time, but hopefully we could give you some tips and strategies to maximize your time and maximize your return on effort when it comes to networking. So these are, I'm going to stop here and stop sharing my screen and start the conversation with us. So I want to start with Heather. Let's start out, how or why does a rock solid network work? Why is it important?
So, you know, as I was just looking at the words in the word cloud, the couple that I wrote down were confidence, consistency, and connections. And when I left my last major role in March of 2020, which might be a time that a lot of us remember, I had zero network. I'd been in an executive role where I was heads down. I had zero network. And I was out of a job. We were in a global pandemic, and I was living, you know, like all of us, sort of locked away with either by yourself or with family. And so for me, what I learned through that process is I've got to build from zero. And so, you know, you know the reasons why it matters, right? It could be to help you advance your career. It could be for gaining a mentor or a sponsor, which is incredibly important related to career advancement. It could be to find a job, which is the role I found myself in, right? Was what do I do now? And how do I build a network that will actually give me professional opportunity starting from zero? But what I discovered along the way was a happy accident, which was it gave me tremendous personal growth in addition to business growth. And, you know, to the folks that mentioned confidence, so two things. One, I had to put in tremendous consistency, and I had to actually start to say to myself, I need a goal of having 2 meaningful conversations a day with people I don't know, and every day, no matter what. So the consistency became the job. And then through that process, I started to build confidence. But I can tell you that in March of 2020, I had neither confidence nor consistency, and I definitely had very few connections. So I kind of learned the hard way why it matters. Jackie,
Amazing.
how about you?
Yeah, I was going to say that Heather, I have to share that with you because I worked for IBM for my entire career. And during that time, I had a strong connections within IBM. And so I found that once I left IBM, I had not taken the time to develop those connections outside of IBM. And so we're going to be talking about the other areas that you need to focus on outside of your company to develop those connections, because they really help you get to the next level. They help you to leverage your skills, and they also help you if you're trying to get business from other companies and things. So it's really, having that strong network is really valuable, and you'll see that in the long run.
I think that's so important. And Lakshmi actually just asked a question in there. How do you make time to have these conversations every day? Heather, what you said is you set a goal.
Yep.
I'm going to call 2 people. I'm going to have 2 conversations a day. And so is there anything else, any other tricks that you give yourself, hacks, as my kids would call them, to make the time to prioritize this?
For me, it was one of the hacks, and I think this was the reality for where I sat at that time of my journey as well. I jumped into a couple of paid networking groups. So I joined Elevate, which was quasi-appropriate or approachable from a pricing perspective at that point. And so that was something that it just became a meeting in my calendar that I was meeting people once a week or once a month for the executive session. So that was one way that, as a brand new start, I joined a networking group that forced me to start the process. But then, Lisa, to your point, it was a goal. It's like, if I haven't had an average of 10 meetings a week, and so it might be that I have a more free day. And so I got 4 meetings done in a day, but I wanted that average of 10 a week, and I had to set that goal for myself.
Mhm.
Jackie, do you have anything else that you've done to try to maximize your time, to make the time?
I would probably say that it is very easy to say I don't have enough time to do it. Because anytime something's not comfortable for you,
Yeah.
you kind of put it on the back burner. And so for me, I had to put it on my calendar. If there was a networking meeting, if there, like, I'm a certified coach, if there was a coaching meeting or an HR meeting, I put it on my calendar and I forced myself to go. As it turns out, each time I went, I was like, oh, I'm so glad I went, because I got to meet some people that really helped in my career moving forward. So I would say put a plan together and put it actually where each time you try maybe 2 a month, like Lisa said, and just do it.
Yeah, I think I use that as well. When I need to do something, I calendar it, even if it's like just to do work on a specific task. I think that's so important. And if your goal is, okay, I'm going to reach out to so many people, because you think about it like a pipeline when you're trying to develop new products. For those of you in the pharmaceutical industry, you might have 10, 20 products in development at different stages along the pipeline, but only 1 or 2 of those is actually going to go to fruition. So you've got to call, or if you're in sales, you have to have so many leads before they move to that next level, to the next stage where you have a conversation, where they go to contract, where you might actually meet somebody. So I think having those goals and fleshing it out on the calendar, figure out how much time is it going to be. 15 minutes twice a week, half an hour twice this week. There's no right answer. It's really for you to decide what it is. Want to move on to the next question. And Jackie, I want you to take this one. What are some guiding principles for effectively building your network? We talked about a couple tactical things, but what are some guiding principles if we step back a little bit?
Well, I would say, first of all, sometimes when I talk to women, they, have this block against getting out there and networking. They think sometimes it's political, oh, I'm not going to do that. I'm not one of the good old boy networks, but I'm telling you that women have their own way of networking, and it's very effective. So I would say that one of the guiding principles is to understand that if networking is a word that turns you off, think of it as building relationships. And we're very good at doing that. And people tend to trust you. There are a couple of ways to get people to trust you. And I mean, there's several ways, but I found that the probably 2 ways that are good for me is to be a good listener. Listen to what other people are saying to you, and also solving problems. If you're listening to them and you're trying to help them solve problems, then you come forward as caring about them. You come forward as being generous. And so also you come forward as sharing resources. So then they begin to trust you and be able to develop that relationship if they know that you're there to say, what can I do to help? How can I help you? How can I bring more value to what you're doing? It develops that trust. So that's one of, I guess, guiding principles that I would say.
Jackie, I think that's so important. What you're saying is it's a 2-way relationship, and the same thing happens. It's that same principle that works with mentoring as well. It's not just about what you can get, what can you give as well. And a relationship is a 2-way street. By the way, same thing in a marriage or partnership, right? If it's just one-sided, it's probably not going to work so well.
That's true.
Heather, what about you? What are some guiding principles that you've used to effectively build your network?
So I would say generosity and curiosity became my guiding principles. So what I realized as I was really kind of starting over was I didn't have a defined outcome for myself. I knew I needed to start working again. I knew I needed to find something to do with my time, right? But I didn't have a defined idea of it's going to be this kind of job or it's going to be building a consultancy. I just knew that I wanted to meet people. And what I discovered was if I could really just listen to Jackie's point, listen to people's stories and understand what mattered to them. What started happening was and it's entirely possible both of you have experienced this with me, where I'll be listening to someone, I'm like, hey, I know somebody that you should meet. And what I started realizing was the more curious I got, the more I had this mental list in my head of other people that I could introduce to whoever I was speaking to, right? And so it became this, rather than what's in it for me and what's my outcome, it was, wow, how can I help this person? And not worry about the outcome for me, because that'll happen at some point. And so I think that's the other reason that building a network on an ongoing basis is so important, because if you just show up transactionally and you just show up saying, hey, I'm looking for a job and I need to find something, or I'm starting a business and I need something from you, it feels kind of gross. But if you can actually say, hey, I just want to get to know you and maybe we can help each other along the way, you start to actually build something meaningful and it feels great.
Absolutely. I want to break this down, and we have a question in the chat, but I want to come back to it, Christine. It's a great question about how do you maintain that relationship once you start, once you have that initial introduction, because it's brief and you need the consistency. But I think we're going to get to it as we talk about breaking this down into digestible pieces, so folks aren't overwhelmed. Oh my God, I have to network with people. What am I supposed to do? What does that mean? So you all talk about 3 categories or types of networks. Can we talk about those, and how do we think about those at different career stages? Heather, do you want to start with about leaning in?
Yeah, so I think to break this down, there are kind of 3 categories of networking that I think about. And by the way, there's still that part of me when I think about networking that means you're at like, you're standing in a room together, awkwardly staring at each other. And like, and I think that's kind of the thing that could be the downside, where you go, oh, I don't want to do that. I don't want to have to show up somewhere and just force conversation. So I think there are kind of 3 categories. One is, and we'll talk about each of these in a little bit more, but one is operational. And operational is really within your own organization, right? So you're building the network, you're fully employed and you're building a network within your own organization. The next way that we would look at it is strategic networking. And that might be a little bit more of, how do I start moving outside my organization, but still within the ecosystem of my existing organization or my existing role. And then the third is more community, and it's really starting to expand that reach and get a little bit broader. So Jackie, you want to talk a little bit about operational networking?
Sure. Operational networking is probably something that most of you are familiar with because it is within your own organization. It is mostly by short-term demands. In other words, you're working with the people in your company, and you're working with them to meet these objectives. So the 2 of you are sharing a goal, and that tends to be a very good way to build relationships, because once you're working on this goal, once you achieve it, then the other person can trust you. They know that you're going to get it done. And so you begin to develop relationships, and you can go back to some of those people and say, hey, can you help me with this? Or can you help me with that? So the organizational networking is really based around meeting objectives that you're working on. And in general, it includes the people like your direct reports, your superior, your peers, internal players as well. It can also include outside people like your customers or your suppliers or your distributors. You know, if you are running into a problem getting a part or something, you call your supplier and they help you out. So you're developing these relationships. So remember, it's task related, and it's usually bound by the demands of that particular situation that you're in. this type of networking, most people are very, very comfortable because a lot of times you don't even know you're networking. You're just getting the job done. So I would say what gives an operational network is power. It really is the quality of the relationship. That's what gives it the power because you now have trust. So that's the operational one, Lisa.
Yeah, I think that's so important. And also, there's a lot of research says that trust develops when we go through a shared experience.
Yeah.
And, that happens a lot just naturally on the job. I think what we need to do a better job about now that so many of us are working either remotely or in hybrid type environments is to seek out those opportunities to have that shared experience, to have that synchronous live experience, because even though you might not be in the same physical location, there are ways to have perceived proximity and to feel that closeness and that trust with others. And so that's one of your homework assignments to everyone out there is to create that. Heather, can you talk for a minute about strategic networks?
Yeah. So, the way I think about this is you're moving from really a functional operator to a business leader, right? And so you're thinking about career expansion and growth. And so, Jackie mentioned you might be talking to a vendor or supplier. One way I think about it is if I'm in a role, what does it look like for me to grow? And that growth doesn't have to be up the ladder. It could be lateral growth. It could be a shift in specialty, for example. And so what I start thinking about is who are the leaders around me and where can I find leaders from whom I can learn, right? Who are the people who are going to stretch me? And it might be someone in a partner organization. When I was in one of my roles, we worked with the largest insurance company in the world, and their chief risk officer became somebody who gave me great insight, right? And so I look at someone like that and go, I can learn, and it may not be a long-term relationship, but I can learn about the mistakes I'm making, right? And so I think about that and go, where are the people that you might have a light touch relationship where you can go, they're doing something that I find interesting and I want to understand more about what they're doing. And again, you don't have to have an answer as to why it's interesting to you. You don't have to have a defined result as part of this. It's just that person's job looks interesting, or that the way that person spends their time looks interesting, and I want to understand more about it. And so that might be, again, with vendors, it might be with partners. I also started really being intentional about joining different networking organizations at a certain point in my career. Whether it was Elevate, whether it was Chief. I'm part of a group right now called CEOX. There's another group called Inner Fifth. And I'm very fortunate these are all female organizations. But it's the intent with that strategic networking is really who can stretch me and grow me in a way that expands my horizons.
I think that's really important. And also people that are going to give you that direct feedback, that feel comfortable and you feel comfortable having those conversations that aren't just saying, hey, you're awesome, that's great. Like, it's wonderful to have the cheerleader, but you also need the folks in your network, especially your strategic network, who are going to tell you when, you know what, that was not very good. You need to do better. And here's how you can. And then to be open to that type of feedback and in a place where you feel safe, that, it's constructive, it's not threatening in a sort of way.
Yeah. And I'll just say to that point, starting my own business, starting my own consultancy was terrifying for me. Building a network with the thought of actually having to get something done with it was terrifying. So having people in my world who could say, hey, you could do this better, right? Like, you're doing great over here, but you could do this better. And here's something that I learned along the way, and let me make it easier for you so you don't have to learn the same lesson I learned, right? Like, that's hugely valuable.
Exactly. Jackie, you look like you were going to say something too.
Oh, yeah. Yes, I just wanted to add, Heather, did you finish?
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to add that the strategic networking is really when you're at a much higher level, like Heather said, you're really looking at the broader picture. And the thing about the strategic network is you don't have control like you did at the functional level. You're
That's a
working
great point.
with people to try to figure out how they fit into the big picture. And most of the time, you don't have direct influence at all. So you have to be negotiating, you have to be collaborating, and you have to figure out what do they bring to the table that fits into the big picture, or convincing them to give their resources or their time to you. So it's at a much higher level, like Heather said, at the business level. And it's all about leveraging your resources. You know, I tell people, typically men do this very, very well. Men will do something for you, and you know that they're going to wait, they're going to want you to give them back a favor. Whereas women will do it because, you know, they enjoy it, they like you. But men are very focused in terms of, I'm going to leverage this. Hey, I need you to give me back that. So it's at a much higher level, a strategic level.
Right. I think that makes sense. It's more transactional. And I think we need to get less fearful about that transaction. Now, it needs to be genuine as well. But I think that's a great point. Jackie, you know, we talked about operational, we talked about strategic. Can you talk for a second about the power of your personal network?
Yeah, the personal network is really largely external, and it's made up of people that you have things in common with. For example, it may be people in your professional associations, in your industry that you know. It may be people in your alumni, like Rutgers. It could be sororities, fraternities, but it's people that you know in your personal communities. And what's so important about this is because when you're working with people in the community, it's a safe place for you. It's a safe place to get help, to expose the problems that you have. It's a safe place to seek advice into, I'm having this problem and I really could use your advice on that. And so, you know, I tell people, utilize that resource. It also is a safe place for you to get development, because you may get a mentor that's in the community or in your industry or your association, and they can help you in terms of your personal development growth. So, you know, I would definitely encourage you to do the third one, which is personal networking as well.
And I think most of us have this and we don't even realize that we have it. So I have a very good group of friends from college, and I graduated almost 30 years ago, and they are still my closest friends, and they are doing amazing things, leaders in industry at their different roles and responsibilities. And, you know, I tell this to my students all the time. You don't have to know everything about everything, but you have to know somebody who knows something that you don't know. And that's both professionally and personally. And so here's my, you know, pull back the curtain Wizard of Oz. When somebody asks me a question at any stage of my career, and I didn't know the answer, I'd say, don't ever make up the answer, by the way. I'd say, that's a really good question. Let me think about it. And I would call my girlfriends from college who are smarter than I am. And I would bounce the scenario off them, come back the next day and say, you know what? I thought about that, and here's what I think we should do. Nobody has to know that you do that. I never even thought of it as my network, but it really is. It's really your network.
I learned that because I was out here trying to make some things happen, and I called my girlfriend and she said, well, you know, Jackie, I don't know, but Sid's a lawyer now. You might want to call Sid, you know. So I'm like calling him up. Hey, I'm from Hampton. That's where I went to undergraduate. And they would help. They would be willing to help. So use that resource.
Yeah, I think that's huge. Okay, we have some great frameworks, but let's talk about expanding our reach. Let's talk about the long game. Is there ever a point when your network is big enough and you can kind of rest? Heather.
So I'm going to give you a straight no before I start the longer explanation. You know, two things related to what you were just talking about that I think play into this really nicely. So I was talking to somebody recently, and they operate on a philosophy of who, not how. So women, when we try to solve a problem, a lot of times women will say, how do I get that done? And Lisa, this is exactly what you were talking about. How do I get that done? How do I solve it? And we might waste hours and hours trying to solve the thing, right? As opposed to traditionally, the male way of networking is, who do I know that can solve this problem for me, right? So start thinking who, not how. So that's one thing that I would just put a bow on that one. And then, I also have my Council of Extraordinary Women. And so I'm very fortunate to have a tight group of women that are just brilliant beyond compare. And I rely on them for a lot. But as I've had to expand and had to grow, I think that sense of curiosity is really important. And what I know and what I can guess about many of the folks on this call is that they I will never be done growing, and I don't know where my career takes me next, right? And so I can tell you that the first 17 years of my career were spent in marketing, advertising, and brand strategy. And then I fell into an industry that I'd never heard of and ended up leading a company in that industry, right? And so when I look at the stages of my career, I have a network that was built in the marketing, advertising, brand strategy days, where I have been able to stay connected to people those years. I have a network I built through the PEO industry, which is the industry that I most recently have been part of, and have built a vast network there. And then I have this entire group of people that I don't know how they fit. I like them. They're smart. They make me better. I like to think I contribute something to their world. And I don't know why we've met yet, but I get something out of it every single time we have a conversation. And so the commitment I make to those people is I'm going to stay in their lives to make sure that I'm contributing something back to them too, right? And so that doesn't mean we're talking every week. So, there are people I talk to quarterly. There are people I talk to every 6 months. But the short answer is no, I don't think your network ever can get too big. And especially if you approach it from a sense of curiosity and generosity, it's what can I learn through these conversations? And what can I give back to the person with whom I'm spending time? And so, yeah.
I think that's so important. Kathy just put something in the chat about the book by Dan Sullivan, which I think you're referencing, is Who, Not How.
Yep.
Which I think is really great. And then Sarah had put in there about our personal board of directors, which is kind of what we're talking about as well. I am a huge fan of that as well, and who you need to have in your corner, because you're going to go to different people for different things, and you're going to serve a role for a lot of folks, and that role may be different for different people depending on how you're related and connected to them.
Well, and to that point, to the personal board of advisors, like I say, I have my Council of Extraordinary Women, and then I have, a CEO that I worked for has become a tremendous sponsor for me, right? And he's retired, but he's got a ridiculous network. And so he'll be out on the golf course and he's talking me up, and I've gotten work from him. I've also met other people who are far more advanced in their careers. And I look at that group of these 4 people that have all sort of advanced beyond me, and I go to them for different reasons, right? And so that's more of a mentorship network, but I ask them different kinds of questions about what might be coming next for me. And so, if I need somebody who's thinking about deal making, then I go to somebody who's thinking about deal making. If I'm thinking about the world of startups and how venture capital thinks, I've got somebody in my world who understands that and who I can say, hey, I'm wrestling with this. Can you help me think through it? Right. So sometimes once you've built an established trust, you earn the privilege of having those conversations.
Yeah, I think that's so important to think about that as well in that board of advisors. And Jackie, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I was just going to say that I agree definitely with you, Heather. There's, I would say, about 4 categories of people that I think should be in your go-to network, if you will. One category are influencers. These are the people that know that game well. They can influence people to take action. And all you need is about 2 people that are like that. They can help you start growing your business, your network. And so I call them influencers. I would say the second category would be probably experts. These are people that we talk about like your mentors. They have the professional experience or the skill to give you the insight. That's like Heather said, when I wanted to find out something about this particular thing, I would go to an expert or mentor. Then there are the people that I think you ought to have in your group called the creators. They are people that are into innovation and they plug in, they know the current trends, they know the research that's out there and they can help you, give you advice like that. And then finally, the connectors. We all know the connectors are people that will connect you, like Heather said, oh, I know somebody over here that can do it, and let me connect the 2 of you. So those are, just from a category point of view, those are the type of people that I think would help you grow your network as well.
Amazing. Absolutely. Now we want to hear from you, and you can just write it in the chat. We want to know some places that you've all spent networking. You met somebody that you added to your network. Where are some of those places? Let's see them. And while you're all putting that in the chat, so just click on the chat to everyone. One of the employee resource groups, great. That's another great way. And as we're talking, I want to also highlight that your network should not just look like you. It should not just be all women. It should be men. It should be people that have different lived experiences than you do. Somebody asked a question of, what can I offer to somebody more senior? And the reality is you're giving them essentially the voice of the customer. What are the, middle managers? What are the entry-level folks saying? What are they thinking? It's almost reverse mentoring for them. So it's really, really helpful. A lot of folks are meeting people at their sorority, on LinkedIn, at the nail salon, other LinkedIn communities, external courses. So there's formal and informal ways. I think the key is, get that elevator pitch down. Trade shows, volunteering. I love it. Jackie, I want it because we're running out of time. I want to talk about brass tacks.
Talk about what?
Brass tacks. Like, what do we have to do? So some specific how-tos and tips. And, we've gotten a couple of questions, how do we approach somebody? How do we sustain the relationship? How do you go about this whole networking thing more specifically?
And you're talking about how to go about it? I mean, I'm looking on the chat and there's some great places that you're meeting people to network.
How do you approach somebody? How do you do, like, what's the equivalent of, do you come here often? But not creepy and cringy.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you are going to a meeting and if you can find out the people that are going to be at that meeting, you can kind of be more strategic in terms of who do I want to meet at that meeting. You may not know the specific people, but maybe you know companies that are going to be there. And so you may kind of figure out, I want to meet the person from company ABC or the company from J&J. And I would also tell you to kind of beef up your personal brand statement so that when they talk to you and you talk to them, then you can actually come across like, this is what I do. This is the value that I add, to my company. And so you can begin to understand what they do in their company and start the conversation going that way.
No, that's great.
I
And
was,
go
go
ahead.
ahead, Lisa.
No, I was just going to ask online, like what is that opening line online as well, that you do?
If I'm doing LinkedIn, I want to make sure that I understand. I go and I look at their profile, and I want to make sure I look for things in LinkedIn, their profile, like maybe they went to the same college I went to. If they did, then that's a lead in for me. Or maybe they're a part of the same sorority or in the same industry as I am. And so that is really kind of how I lead in to when I'm trying to develop a relationship in LinkedIn.
Yeah, and that I think that's key. And how are you connected? What is that commonality that you have as well? I think the other thing, and then Heather, I'd love for you to chime in as well. You need to articulate very clearly and very succinctly and very short way. What is your goal? Like, why are you even reaching out to this person? What do you hope to get from this relationship? Heather, anything to add there? Or another question we had is, how do you sustain the relationship? So
Yeah.
you met somebody in an event or you had an introductory Zoom chat with somebody. Now what?
So I can be the most awkward person on the planet. So a lot of times I will say, hey, I really love this conversation. Would it be okay if we stayed in touch? And what feels like a good cadence for you? I mean, I've literally asked that question. How often would it feel comfortable for you to stay connected? And I've yet to have somebody laugh in my face. I've yet to have somebody go, God, you're such a dork. How can you ask that question that way? Um, and so I think the staying connected, there's a big element of vulnerability with that, right? Like you have to say, hey, I really enjoyed meeting you. And the other thing that I would say, somebody in the chat put in a note about LinkedIn and always putting a note. I actually started building a rule for myself with LinkedIn, which was I would look at people that I wanted to connect with through LinkedIn, but when somebody reached out to connect with me, my standard rule became I would be happy to connect. Can we jump on the phone for 15 minutes so we can get to know each other a little bit before we just add each other as a connection? And that opened a lot of doors. It also filtered a lot of people who were just trying to sell me something. Because they would surface really quickly as, oh, I'm just selling you something and I don't actually want to engage. And so I think maintaining that connection it takes work. I keep a running list. I'm old school. I keep an Excel spreadsheet, but you could use less annoying CRM. You could use HubSpot. You could use any sort of tracking device to say, hey, when did I talk to this person last? And sometimes it's just shooting them a text to say, hey, I saw this news story and I thought of you, or something came up topically in the macro environment, thought of you. And so I think that sort of informal touch is really valuable as well. I also want to address really quickly, somebody in the chat just put in, how do you handle the rejection if you don't have a good experience? I was going to say it's going to happen, but it will also happen where you meet somebody where you just go, didn't feel like a connection. Didn't feel like somebody I want to spend time with. And so be graceful, be polite, and know that you're not for everybody. Everybody's not for you. And you just move along, right? Like it's not a one and done. And then in terms of approaching people, the do you come here often? I think it's hey, you've done something that's really interesting and I'd love to learn more about it. Even if it's totally outside your area of expertise, totally outside your interest, your functional area. Hey, you're doing something really interesting with your life. Would you spend 30 minutes talking to me? And I've yet to have somebody say no.
Yeah, people love talking about themselves.
Yes. Yeah. And remember, you can keep that if it's the connection is meant to be,
You'll keep it.
As long as you bring value, that connection happens. They need to bring value, you need to bring value.
And Jackie, sorry, I just want to chime in on the value piece because someone asked, like, how do you bring value to people above you in your career ladder or your career journey? I can tell you the people who have far surpassed me in their journey love the concept of helping me in mine. And I can also say that when a younger person approaches me, or somebody who's mid-career approaches me and says, hey, how do you think about this? Nothing, nothing makes me happier than feel like I
That's
can
right.
contribute to their world in some
Yeah.
way.
I think
Yeah.
that's
That reminds me of Maya Angelou's quote that says, what does she say? I probably messed this up. I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you
How you
made
make
them
them
feel.
feel.
right.
Yeah.
Love that
Yeah.
one. Love it. And I think one more point on the rejection part. Women have a really, really hard time with this for some reason. I actually think athletes have a less hard time. So I was an athlete,
Yeah.
and if any of you watched Ted Lasso, the show, just be a goldfish.
Be a
Forget it
goldfish.
happened. Go past it. Nobody else has thought about it. Like, they're not stewing over it. So if you were rejected, okay, somebody once told me in my career, when I was trying to put forth proposals and get work done within the organization I was in, no is just the beginning of yes.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
accept the rejection. I know I love Ted Lasso.
It will
So
happen.
much.
So just be a goldfish, and
Yeah.
let it roll off you and move ahead. We are basically out of time, which is absolutely crazy. But I want to see how valuable this was for everyone else. And while we're doing that, I want to do, whoops, hold on, let me go here. Do you feel better equipped at networking after this webinar? And while we're doing this, I want to do a lightning round. Jackie, I want to start with you. What is the most random place you met somebody who became important
my
as part of
God.
your network?
Oh my God. I had two places. One, people will probably have heard about it. It was on the airplane. Flying home, I was sitting next to this guy, and of course, everyone seems to think I'm a teacher, which is great. But he asked me, was I a teacher? As it turned out, I said, no, I work for IBM. As it turned out, he used to work for IBM, and my team had really helped him. And so he said, why don't you come in and talk to me afterwards when I get back? And let's just see, because I know what your team did, and let's just see if we can make something happen in my organization. And so that was one of the things that turned out to be a really windfall for me. The other one was, now this is kind of morbid. I actually went to a colleague's going home service, and at the repast, I sat at the table with this person, and we were just talking. As it turns out, she wanted more business, and she brought me in, and she was a very good paying client. What can I say?
Amazing. Amazing. What about you, Heather? What's the most random place?
Well, I'm going to give a shout out to Sarah Montague. So Sarah's on this call right now, and I was wondering if that was the same Sarah Montague. We worked together at Arnold Advertising back in the mid 90s, and both found ourselves in transition, call it 2022 maybe, and we're both members of Chief. And we were in a group focused on career transitions, reconnected. She was generous enough to open her network to me, but we reconnected after not having talked to each other since, call it 1995. And we didn't even work closely together back then. So that's one. And here she is today. So thank you, Sarah. The other one was a really funny one, which was, I had someone that used to work for me like 2017, 2015, maybe. He left the company, and he reached out to me 6 months ago, and we just started talking again after not having talked for ages. And he's not somebody that I would have ever thought of as someone in my network, in quotes. And we've reconnected, and we're both small business owners, and he has introduced me to more and varied people. I'm talking to people in the venture capital space. I'm talking to people in the lean manufacturing space. So it is a total surprise and delight. And I have met probably 15 people through him, and I've actually gotten work from many of them. And so that
Wow.
has been incredible. So yeah, total surprise and delight.
Amazing. Mine are even more random, but I've met somebody on a ski lift. The big joke is if I talk to you and I realize you're in finance, you're going to be a guest lecturer in my class. My kid's pediatrician's son ended up working for the same managing director I worked for earlier in my career. He spoke in my class. And so you never know. So my recommendation to folks is, just be friendly. You're standing next to someone in line at the Starbucks and, you start having a conversation and, where are you headed? And, they're going to work, and then you find out and you might have some sort of commonality in place. And so you never know.
No.
My husband's clients, some are speaking in my class because he's in finance. One became one of my really dear friends. And we wrote a chapter in my students and I wrote a chapter in a book that she published. So you never know where you're going to meet folks. And to sustain the relationship when you do, you come out of a networking event, you come out of a mentoring, group mentoring session. It is your responsibility to continue the relationship. Reach out to someone, even if it has been a year, even if it has been 20 years, because people have had amazing arcs and within their lives where you might be able to help them, they might be able to help you, but it's a relationship, just like a partnership, just like a marriage, and that takes work. And so it's not going to happen on its own. It's not going to necessarily be formally facilitated. You have to make the time. You have to make the effort. Any last minute nuggets you want to share with us before I close us out, Jackie?
No, I don't think so. I enjoyed it.
Thank you.
I would say just have fun with the process. I think that for me was the biggest surprise about learning how to network. Like I said, I had sort of this view of you're standing awkwardly in a room, and as somebody who looks like an extrovert but is actually an introvert, being in a cocktail party is my worst nightmare. So have fun with it. Get curious about other people's stories, and you'll be shocked at how much you grow from just hearing the stories of other people.
I love it. Well, thank you both. According to our poll, we are all feeling better equipped at networking after this webinar. So Heather and Jackie really appreciate it and really appreciate you. I have to give a shout out to our partners. We are part of Rutgers. We are the Rutgers Center for Women in Business, but we are not able to put any of this stuff on without the generosity and support of companies and individuals. So I'm grateful for all of you. Thank you for attending. If you are inclined to support the center, please do so. The QR code is right here. And we are done with webinars for the end of the semester because we are on the semester, but stay tuned. We have a lot of amazing events lined up. So you are on our mailing list, and we will be sure to get it. Enjoy spring, and thank you all very much. Have a wonderful weekend.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you, Lisa.